I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a Greener World, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. Birds are among the first to be impacted by environmental change, and unfortunately studies today show that a lot of bird species are threatened due to climate change, habitat loss, and of course herbicide use. Now, there is some good news, and there's one place where we can make a positive difference with our feathered friends, and that's in our own backyard. For every plant we place, for every one that we let go to seed, and for every plant that we don't spray, well, those can all make a difference for the better. Last year, we filmed an episode about leaving the rat race and slowing down in the garden. The garden we featured had a very impressive way of intentionally drawing in the nature around it. So when we were looking for a place to showcase backyard birds, we knew we wanted to film it there. Margaret Roach is a well-known author who left a high-powered corporate job to garden and write full-time in upstate New York. With her 3 best-selling books and a popular blog, Margaret shares her gardening wisdom with others on a daily basis. Her eye for designing with nature in mind shows at every turn in her landscape. But what many people don't realize is that this design is a direct result of her relationship with her backyard bird companions.
I often say that I really think that birds taught me to garden, and even though I didn't know that was what was happening at the time, when I first came here almost 30 years ago and I was clearing the land and getting ready to make gardens, there were all these birds all over the place, and I started to learn to identify them and engage with them. And I bought field guides and looked up who they were and what they were all about, and I realized I wanted more of them in the garden that I was going to make. So in order to do that, I kind of researched and found out what their needs were, and I found out there were lots of bird plants, but for different seasons of the year, different kinds of plants appealed to them. So they liked some plants for nesting in the spring, and some plants that provided food for their young, and some plants that provided food at migration time in the fall, and plants like evergreens for winter protection from the wind and so forth. And so I started deliberately adding plants for the birds for all their needs in all the different seasons. And so in doing that, in making choices for 365 days worth of plants for the birds, I kind of accidentally ended up with 365 days worth of plants for the gardener too, and a 365-day garden. They taught me, and I'm grateful for that, and they continue to entertain me as well, so yeah. I think for me, what birds have done is be teachers, and so I think it was my window in, and the reason I would encourage other gardeners and other people in general to welcome birds is because it's a window into the cycle of nature and how things work and who eats what and who gets eaten by, by who, and just how things fit together and how things work. So I think it's a big aha, and birds, because they are another 2-legged creature like us, which to me, seeing them walk around and so forth, we don't have that many other creatures that are like that. I feel kind of close to them, and so I think it's, as I said, an opportunity for engagement, for ahas, for connection, and for just being taught about the natural world. So to me, that's why. And of course, there are bigger reasons, like you can participate in conservation, you can help, you can feed them in the winter. There's lots more, but for me, it was the aha and the window into the bigger picture.
Now, Margaret, if somebody wanted to become more involved with birds in their own backyard,
Yes.
what are some of the most important things for them to take into consideration?
Number one thing that you have to do is, if you want to have a lot of birds, you have to have a lot of bird food. And I don't mean in a feeder, I mean bugs.
Right.
So you got to grow a lot of bugs. And if you use chemicals, you're not growing a lot of bugs for the birds to eat. So you have to stop using chemicals, I think, number one. And I always think of what that Harvard biologist, the esteemed D.O. Wilson, said. He calls all the little things that kind of live in or near the soil layer the little things that run the world.
Yeah.
And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, even he doesn't know with all his degrees what they do, but he knows without them we'd all be dead. Gosh. Not just the birds, but us. So we have to have the food chain right at the bottom really intact. We can't use chemicals, including fertilizers, and sterilize the soil, you know. So that, I think, is really, really important. And then we have to stop mowing, really, also.
You won't get a lot of argument out of some people
But
there.
look, I did, at least in one little area, right?
Right, right.
So again, so what I'm doing is I'm sort of making a bug growing area, an area where lots of things come into bloom and so forth. And there's also host plants for caterpillars earlier on that eat their foliage. And so there's lots of action up here, and the dragonflies love to come up here, and the bees love to come, everybody loves to come up here. So I think that's kind of, you know, what a gardener has to do first of all. Stop killing bugs and start growing more bugs, encouraging more bugs with more diversity.
Right. And you've also said, in addition to learning about the birds in your particular area, you should learn more about the bugs that are there too.
Well, and you know, me with my crazy pile of field guides. I mean, I think I have more field guides than any other kind of book. And it's really important because, again, it's the who eats what and who eats that creature and who eats that creature. It's the cycle. Yeah. And so it's fantastically interesting when you find out whose diet is what. Yeah. And then you note that, like, you know, you grow a particular plant and the right butterfly or caterpillar shows up. I mean, it's like, how did they know it was here? And similarly, the birds, you know. So I think that's what's so great, those relationships, those ancient relationships, really.
Yeah. I think you've made some new fans today. We don't have to mow as much, and we're allowed to have more bugs in our backyard.
Yes. Well, actually, I think a lot of people worry that they're like, what do you mean I can't kill bugs? Yeah. But we have to get over the wish to squish. Or, you know, we got to stop like rushing to crush bugs. Like, we have to stop it. Yeah. Because if we don't even know what they are, why are we killing them? And I think of them, again, as bird food, or frog food, or snake food. You know, I think of them, or dragonfly food. I think of them as part of a healthy garden and planet, right?
Yeah. And if only 3% of all the bugs out there are pests anyway, that means 97% are good or neutral.
And I squish the ones that I know to be pests that are usually alien. You know, like a Japanese beetle, you'll see me squishing that.
Out of here.
Right, exactly. But not indiscriminate, you know, lethal actions.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah. With the pollinators, even though the birds may not eat some of them, like bees and so forth, which probably don't taste very good, the pollinators are doing a job that ends up serving the birds and small mammals and so forth as well, which is that they're pollinating, which is going to make seeds, which is going to make fruit and so forth. So they're helping to produce food that the birds and others may eat. Hummingbirds are interesting. We only have one species here, but even if you're not using native species, certain honeysuckles, salvias that may be native to other areas of the country, penstemons, etc., the more familiar, quote, hummingbird plants, I found that some of my garden plants even are very appealing to them. Certain tiny species, morning glories, and especially a lot of self-sowing nicotiana, which I've had for like 20 years and just keep sowing and sowing. And I let them sow right outside my windows so that in the late summer and fall, I'm surrounded by hummingbirds where I sit and work all day.
So once we put those plants in our landscape that provide a food source, and then we have a water source, there's still a lot of other considerations, though, to attract the maximum number of birds and keep them happy.
And one of those should make gardeners happy, which is that you don't have to be as tidy as you think you do, which is kind of great, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, don't clean up too soon. Don't treat the garden, especially in fall, when we're approaching fall and winter where there's going to be less food available. Don't treat it like you're vacuuming your living room, starting at one corner and working all the way to the other, right?
Yeah.
But leave things up that bear seed, like some of these grasses that are near us, you know. Leave things up to benefit wildlife till the last minute, right?
Yes.
And so I tease the garden apart. In some areas I just leave up, and it's actually visually it can be very beautiful also.
Yeah.
You know, like grasses and so forth, and forbs dancing in the sun full of seeds in the winter, you know, with the snow even above the snow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's important, and creating lots of edge habitat, what's called edge habitat. So, you know, not where the mown grass meets a forest.
Exactly.
None of that vertical crazy stuff. You know, where it's flat and then vertical crazy stuff.
Like you've got right there.
Yeah, so I've made more big islands of multi-layered things next to where I have mown areas and before the forest edge. I'm surrounded by a tall forest.
Well, basically you're like simulating nature.
Correct, lots of layers.
Lots of layers,
and
exactly.
so they say edge, and edge is really where the action is for the birds and other wildlife.
Layers
You
are
know,
important.
and you know, full of things like vines, thorns, shrubs, conifers, mix it up.
Diversity.
Right, absolutely, and multi-seasons.
Yeah. Now, we all know that water is an important resource, especially if you want to attract wildlife to your backyard. And for birds, it's the most important thing, and they need it 365 days a year. Now, having access to water in an urban setting especially is not always that easy, but you don't need a big fancy pond or anything like that to attract the birds, because you can even use an open container or a lid and just fill it with water. Perhaps put a rock in the middle where they can land and then drink the water and then bathe around it. And when it gets dirty, of course you want to make it clean and make sure that you scrub it out. Now, if you live in an area where the water happens to freeze, you've got to have access to that water. But it's a simple fix, and it's a de-icer. Now, you can buy those online or at a bird store for not a lot of money, and you can get one that's appropriately sized for the area that you're trying to de-ice. But if you want birds to come, you need to make that area available for them every day of the year, and a de-icer is a good answer for that. Now, while it may sound romantic to add a bird or nesting box to your location, there are some important things that you need to consider first. Otherwise, you might set those birds up for disaster. For example, how far apart do you space them? What's the size of the box? And even what material do you use? For example, you don't want to put the box up against a tree, because then you make it easy for predators to get to them, like snakes and raccoons and others. Even the material that you use, if it's a dark color or it's made out of metal, well, that can become too hot for your baby birds. So the first thing you need to do, decide the type of bird that you want to attract, and then do your homework and go from there. But we have some great information on our website under the show notes for this episode, and the website address, it's the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Margaret, you know, so many people love to have those bird feeders right outside their favorite viewing window.
Right.
Of course, it's entertaining, but they also think it's important to supplement their diet. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, the garden is the bird feeder. And yes, I do have a bird feeder that I use when the bears are asleep, from maybe Thanksgiving to March or so. But it's really important, if we're going to feed with artificial feeders, that we keep the birds safe when we're doing that. Clean them regularly so they don't transmit disease from bird to bird, you know, from infection that they pick up on the feeder. And also to not invite a confusing visual for an incoming bird who wants to light on that feeder to eat, to come in at high speed and bang into a window, one of the leading causes of songbird death. So you want to put the feeder either within 2 feet of the house or the window, or 30 or feet farther away from the window, so that there's none of those high impact, you know, collisions.
Right. They can differentiate at that point between the real thing and the reflection.
And they've slowed down. You know, do you know what I mean? They've slowed it. Yeah. So you want to make sure that there's no mistakes. So that, and if we're talking about bird safety, I think the other leading cause of death of songbirds when they come into our human environments is our cats.
Right.
So we really can't have cats out, you know, marauding, because they can't resist birds.
Yeah. Well, it's like, what, 1 billion birds a year die from the bird strikes, and I think similarly for the cats.
From the cats, and some numbers even say multiple times that, depending on which research data you look at. Yes.
Now, those are very big numbers.
So we need to keep birds safe. We need to help keep birds safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've been gardening with nature and birds for a very long time, so no substitute for experience, right? But you had your guidebooks, so that helped.
Yes.
But that wasn't the only thing.
No, There were even some free or almost free resources that I used right from the very beginning, like the Great Backyard Bird Count or the Project Feeder Watch. And what you do is it's a citizen science project. So you are making observations, recording them, and then sharing them with the scientists. And you learn a lot and they learn a lot too, which is great. But the especially great thing when you're learning to bird is that when you sign up, they send you like a whole form to fill out with all the birds listed that might be in your area and a flyer with pictures of them. So you can really learn right away. This is what the male of this looks like, this is what the female looks like, I might see this one, I might see that one. And I just started learning more and more and more birds. And then I got past the flyer point and got my field guides. And just kept going. And so participating, and now we do it online, of course. We participate, we share our data online.
Which is so important because, everybody's helping everybody else. And you do a great job of that because you're so giving of your information, and I know so many people are learning from that. But it's really just kind of, it takes everybody involved.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
And it's fun to check off the little boxes once you make that idea.
I get so excited when I see a new bird, even this many years later. I'm like, oh, I saw one I've never seen before. It's so exciting.
There are some great organizations that offer support and information for birding, but one of the best is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Ithaca, New York. As a world leader in the study, appreciation, and conservation of birds, they're known for their technological innovations and for engaging people of all ages in protecting birds and the planet. Maya Thompson is the e-learning specialist at the lab. Her job is to create online and interactive resources geared toward a deeper understanding of birds.
So the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a place where researchers, educators, and students are all here to celebrate birds. And we are lucky in that the researchers are here doing scientific research, and the writers are here learning about the scientific research, and people who are educators are trying to put this all together and bring it to as many people as possible. And I think it's a really unusual place that way. My role here as the e-learning specialist is to take the wonder of birds and bring it to as many people as possible. When people start tuning into birds, they really start to get curious because there's so much to learn. And we want to help satisfy curiosity. So as e-learning really just means bringing to as many people as possible wherever they are. So you're in your yard, you want to know the answer, we want to bring it to you. So we've got a whole bunch of resources that try to help you satisfy your curiosity about birds. So birding's really changing. So anyone interested in birds likely has a phone in their pocket. So when you're out there and you're watching that little flash of color go across up in the sky, you can actually use your phone to help you. And there are lots of ways to do it. One of the ways is a free app called Merlin, and that uses crowdsourced data to help you figure out what that bird is. So you actually can just tell it where you are and a little bit of information about size and color, and it's going to give you a list of the likely birds in your area. But it's based on the collective mind of a big citizen science-based database that allows you to actually get better information than you would by flipping through a field guide. So I think just like knitting and canning, there's a new generation of birders. And of course, the new generation of birders, they're all tech savvy. And so they're really fun things that we've developed partially for the younger audience, and one of them is called Birdsong Hero. So Birdsong Hero is a game, and it plays on the fact that when you hear a bird, you might not necessarily know what it is. And it's also sometimes really hard to remember the pattern of a song without having any visual to go along with it. So Birdsong Hero actually allows you to listen to a bird, and then it actually asks you to choose from 3 visualizations of that sound that you hear. And it's just a fun game. It goes really quickly, but at the end, you're actually able to unite your senses, your ears and your eyes, to help you remember those song patterns. And so it's just one of the ways that you can sort of gamify the joy of the process of learning about birds. We have so many options now with interactivity in websites, and we're not just trying to make it interactive because it's fun, but it also helps you learn. So when you're asked to think about something or gaze at a photo and think about it before you answer the question. So what is this feather for? Well, I don't know. Does it help bird fly? Does it help them attract a mate. If you think about it before you answer, and then you get the feedback, it really helps you learn. It gets at that spark of curiosity. You have a little bit of a question. You've thought about it before you get the answer, and that really helps people learn. And so a lot of the websites that we develop are actually designed with that in mind, so that you're helping yourself learn by thinking about it a little before we give you the answer.
Well, this has got to be one of the most beautiful places ever, and it's on your campus, so technically this is your office, right?
Yeah, not a bad place to have an office.
No, we should all be so lucky. Now tell me about where we are.
These are the trails outside of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Visitor Center. It's called Sapsucker Woods because we have a lot of sapsuckers here. Yellow-bellied sapsucker is our mascot.
Yeah.
And it's a sanctuary for birds. There are a whole lot of birds that live here.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Now you all are so actively involved with the public and the citizen scientists out there. I know Margaret is a big fan of that, very important to her. Tell me about some of the projects that you're involved with, and maybe one in particular.
Yeah, so citizen scientists are basically taking their observations, their inspiration, and sharing it with the world so that we can gain a better understanding of birds and wildlife.
Yeah.
Yard map is very cool. You actually map your yard and learn about what you can do to protect wildlife and improve wildlife habitat in your yard, and share that with others. And then this snowball effect happens where people are seeing what others are doing, and it's really having an exciting effect on how we view conservation and how other people are getting involved that wouldn't typically be involved in science.
Right, and it's that collaborative effort, and then that resource provides tools for them to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
You have so many great programs, but I love the one that focuses on the urban environment. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you can bird in the city too, and Celebrate Urban Birds is a great way to do that and share your information with us. So you just take a half a basketball court size space anywhere, and you sit for 10 minutes and you report on 16 birds, yes, no, or unsure. And when you add that information to our citizen science database, we're really learning a lot about where birds are in the urban environment and how they're moving through it, and in a completely new way than we've understood in the past.
Yep, and again, it's that sharing of information. What about, you had the bird feeder count.
Yeah, so Feeder Watch is fantastic because so many millions of people across the country are feeding birds.
Yes.
And there's a lot of, and watching over their backyards and observing birds, and Feeder Watch allows you to take your observations and again, share it with the collective mind so we can understand what's going on with feeder birds.
Yes, and then there's the famous backyard bird count.
Yeah, so that's 4 days in February, a great way to get started. It's basically counting as many birds as you can in your backyard, taking photos of them, uploading them to our website, and sharing that information, a celebration of birding in winter.
Yeah, very cool program. You know, of all the outdoor activities popular in America today, birding comes in at number 15, just ahead of cycling. So it only makes sense that we do our part to help sustain their populations, especially when you consider much of that can be done from our own backyards or balconies. If any of what you saw today intrigues you, we have a lot more information on our website under the show notes for this episode, and the address, it's the same as our show name. It's growingagreenerworld.com. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Joe Lample, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World. All right, so here we are working, and these guys for school are coming through here just cruising around having the best time. I mean, how good is that? I think we need to move up here and make our offices right off campus. Beautiful, right?